BookTube, I'm Vanessa and today I'm here to do my November wrap-up. The first thing that I read in November was a book called The Day Guernica Was Bombed, and this is a book about the day Guernica was bombed. I read this for one of my classes at school. So this book is basically just a collection of like first-hand accounts of people that actually survived the bombing, and it was really heart-wrenching to read. It was really like raw and emotional because of that. I think it's definitely worth the read if you have any interest in that subject, especially because I think the bombing of Guernica is something that, at least as an American student in the public school system, I didn't learn about this at all. I've heard it mentioned mainly in reference to the Picasso painting, but none of my history classes or social studies classes or anything like that have really gone into Guernica, and I'm pretty sure the only reason I'm learning about it in this class is because my teacher is Basque. So I definitely, like, it's really heartbreaking to realize just how many atrocities have happened in the world that we as American students probably don't ever really learn about. So if you would like to delve into one of them and learn more, this is a good book. However, one thing that I will say that made this book a little bit difficult to follow was just the formatting of those survivor accounts, because they weren't told one by one. Like the author didn't let one person tell their full story of the full day and then switch to another person's full story. He broke them up and like interspersed them so it was in chronological order, and I think that made it hard to follow, at least for me as a more character-driven person. I know this is nonfiction, but I think it still applies in that I was wanting to follow what one person was doing. Like I was invested in this guy that was like hiding over here, and I wanted to know what happened to him, but then we were like switching to this different person who was like off in a different place, and by the time we came back to the original person, I had already kind of like forgotten what was going on with each person because they was just broken up so much. So that is one thing that I say was a little bit difficult to read with this book, but I think obviously first-hand accounts, you can't get more personal than that when you're talking about something like this, and also it had a lot of information beyond that as well, like from the author's notes and everything. So yeah, it was an interesting book, and I am really glad that I got to read it and that I have like knowledge about that event now. The next thing that I attempted to read in November was a Hermione fanfic called We Learned the Sea, and this used to be one of my all-time favorite fanfictions like 10 years ago. Like I said, it is a Hermione fanfic, Draco Hermione, so if you're not into that, then I'm sorry that you've not been blessed with the beauty that is Hermione in your life. Basically, this fanfic occurs after everyone has graduated from Hogwarts, but the war with Voldemort is still going on. So Harry and Hermione are working as Aurors, and Draco is a Death Eater off doing horrible Death Eater things until the day that he comes to the Ministry and turns himself in to Harry Potter and tells the Aurors that he will help them take down Voldemort in exchange for a pardon and his freedom. So this ends up with Harry and Hermione working very closely with Draco in a safe house, and over time of being forced to work in close quarters with each other and consider each other allies for once, Draco and Hermione both start to realize that maybe they don't know everything about the other person that they thought they did, and maybe some of the assumptions that they had about that person are incorrect, and that there's more than meets the eye. And like I said, almost a decade ago, this used to be one of my favorite Hermione fics. I thought that it was beautiful and atmospheric and slow burning, and I really loved the characterization of everyone, and I think that those are all still valid compliments to give this fic, but this time around I just wasn't as into it, and I ended up DNFing it like halfway through because it was just so boring and I felt like nothing was happening. I don't know if I've just like somehow raised my standards for fanfic quality, which is a bad thing. Like I don't want to do that, but I don't know, I couldn't help being disappointed with this fanfic. Chapters where it's like a 10-foot wall of text of just them like sorting out their feelings in an internal narrative, which I can appreciate and I used to appreciate in this fic, but this time it wasn't doing it for me. And another thing that I had an issue with this time that was stopping me from being invested in the romance was Draco's like anger issues, which again, like it makes sense for Draco's character, and I don't necessarily like fanfics that whitewash him and turn him into this like loving, gentle, kind gentleman. I do like him to have an edge to him. I do like him to be like sassy and brooding and maybe a little bit morally gray, but this fic gave him some like violent anger outbursts where he was like yelling into Hermione's face and like threatening her and stuff like that, and I just wasn't into that. Not a turn on for me. So like I said, I ended up DNFing this mostly because I was friggin' bored. But I still think that in the world of fanfic in general, this is a quality fic. It's well put together, it's well done. So if you are in the market for a Hermione fic, I would still recommend checking this out to see if it's something that you might be into. Another book that I read in November was The Call by Paller O'Galeen. This is a dark fae Irish folklore book, and it is basically about the fae taking revenge on Ireland for forcing them to live underground by abducting teenagers and taking them into the fae world to hunt them. Every teenager at some point will be called by the fae. You don't know when it'll happen. It's totally random. And the survival rate of these teenagers at first was 1 in 100. So that's not very good. And now all the teenagers have to go to survival combat school instead of regular school to teach them like how to fight and how to evade the fairies and stuff. But even then, the survival rate is still only 1 in 10 people. So as you can imagine, society is crumbling. And our main character is actually a girl named Nessa, who had polio as a child, so now her legs are paralyzed, and of course everyone looks at her like, why are you even trying? Like, you're not going to be able to run away from the fairies when you get called and stuff. But Nessa is determined to do her best to survive, even though she knows the odds are against her. And I think it was just a really cool book. It was very dark. It was action-packed and exciting and creepy and eerie, and I really liked it. So if you are into the idea of like really dark fairies, I would recommend this book. And the last thing that I want to talk about for November is The Diviners. I read The Diviners in October, but I read Lair of Dreams and Before the Devil Breaks You in November. The Diviners is an amazing book series about people with supernatural powers living in 1920s New York. And none of them really know why they have these powers or what's going on. There's some kind of government conspiracy. There's also some kind of like supernatural ghosty nightmare stuff that keeps happening that they're trying to hold back, and so they have to come together and learn about who they are, learn about their powers, learn about what it is that is trying to come into the world and how to stop it. And it is so good. Like, I love this series so much. I cannot get enough of it. All of the characters are so lovable, and it's just like they feel like real people that I actually care about. It is diverse in pretty much any way you can think of. We've got characters of all different races and ethnicities and religion and sexual orientation. We have disabled characters and characters that have been through different types of traumatic things in their past and are dealing with them in different ways now, and they're all just so good. And another thing that's so amazing about this book series is that it's set during the 20s, with like obviously the roaring 20s, like Gatsby flapper parties and stuff, which is an amazing setting to read about, but it doesn't gloss over all of the ugly things that were happening during that time and also before that time as well. It doesn't gloss over slavery or the treatment of Native Americans, the income inequality and labor exploitation and the First World War and the eugenics movement, and like all of the things that make America's history a nightmare are in this book as well, alongside all of the things that make it look shiny and golden and glorious. And that's one of the biggest themes in this book, is that you can't sweep the past under the rug and forget about it, because much like the ghosts that our diviners are fighting against, it will always come back to haunt you. So if you are like me and are late to the diviners train and haven't gotten around to reading it yet, I cannot urge you to do it enough. Like, it is so beautiful and so good. And the writing, like, I don't think I've read anything by Libba Bray. I was not expecting her writing to be this like poetic and lyrical and beautiful. Like, it's so good. Read The Diviners, please. And that is everything that I read in November. I hope that you guys enjoyed this wrap up. If you did, you can go ahead and give it a little thumbs up, because that really helps me. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, you could do that too if you wanted to. I try to post videos every Monday and Thursday, and I just like to talk about books with you guys. So let me know in the comments what you read in November, or if you read any of these things, and I hope that I get to talk to you soon. Bye!